With the air quality in Delhi taking a turn for the worse, restrictions, in fact, under the Graded Response Action Plan, or GRAP, to check polluting activities have come into force. The dip in air quality was the result of low wind speed and a drop in temperature. There are presently at least 13 pollution hotspots in Delhi. 8 more locations clocked an air quality index reading higher than 300 today. And that really is critical, because if you actually looked into some of the data and looked at, for example, the PM 2.5 count, remember PM 2.5 particles are the ones that cause the maximum damage because they are the smallest measurable. Those numbers of PM 2.5 have in instances gone above 450, and that is dangerous by any standard. Now, why are we discussing this? And it's something that we've been doing ad nauseum for more than a decade, for a few simple reasons. There is now clear-cut data which links air pollution with death. That was not the case earlier. With this data, governments, in fact, around the world have no objective reason whatsoever not to act. The question is, can they and will they? But what is this data that I'm talking about? Consider this. A report by Lancet back in 2019 says 1.6 million premature deaths were because of air pollution in 2019. India topped in deaths because of pollution. Globally, China was second. In 2019, pollution deaths have accounted for nearly 18% of all deaths in India. A report by Greenpeace says over 120,000 died because of air pollution in India in 2020. Air pollution caused economic damages of 2 lakh crores in India. Greenpeace and IQ Air in 2021 have said that 54,000 premature deaths in Delhi took place in 2020 because of air pollution. A University of Chicago study on pollution has said that lives are being shortened by almost 10 years in Delhi. You live here, you breathe this air, chances are that you will live for 10 years less than you would otherwise. A Harvard study of 2021 says 1/3 of deaths in India every year are linked to air pollution. A World Health Organization report of 2021 says air pollution is causing 7 million premature deaths a year globally. So that's why we are back here talking about something that we've spoken about at least for the last decade. Joining us now, Bhargav Krishna, former fellow at the Center for Policy Research, Aarti Khosla, Director of Climate Trends, Bhavreen Khandari is an environmentalist and author, and Dr. G.C. Khilnani, Chairperson of the PSRI Institute of Pulmonary Critical Care, and a very important medical voice in this discussion. Bhargav, let me come to you first before we actually get to the data on air pollution. I think the reason we are discussing this, and I've sort of established it in the graphics points that I mentioned, is important, that air pollution causes deaths. There is now data. 10 years ago, the cause of death was never air pollution, right? It was something else, a heart attack or some sort of morbidity. And people could never say that that person has definitely died as a result of air pollution. But now we've got volumes of data, and the link is absolutely clear. What we are breathing is actually killing us, right?
Right. Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, Vishnu. I think you're absolutely right. And I think the volume of evidence that you have presented yourself, I think, speaks to that. Right? It's not just about evidence showing that people are dying prematurely because of air pollution, but you now have reams of evidence that have been published in India alone, which are showing associations between air pollution and long-term health problems, whether it be hypertension or high blood pressure, whether it be diabetes, whether it be chronic lung deficiency. So many other illnesses are associated with air pollution through locally generated indigenous evidence, right? And that was a big sticking point before. The fact that this was extrapolated based on global data, that is no longer the case. Over the last 10 years, we've generated so much data that it's almost irrefutable at this point.
And we'll discuss some of the specifics in a moment. But Aarti Khosla, how bad is it at the moment? Not just Delhi, but across parts of North India. Again, this is something that's changed over the last 10 years. Maybe about 7-8 years back, we would have data only for Delhi. We now have a lot more data, which is available for larger parts of, for example, North India. So my question is, what is the situation presently across North India?
Well, Vishnu, as you established, we have a lot of data now. The fight for air quality that happened in the last couple of years at least went on to us giving more monitoring that is in place right now. But even then, it's the management which is an issue. If you look at what the Delhi government has put out in terms of analysis of the 13 hotspots and what's going on over there, it's quite clear that the action on ground is still missing. You can talk about flying more buses in the future, but what about traffic junctions? What about just busy areas where you really need to have traffic management and you do not have those basic initiatives that are going on? PUC is something which has been spoken of quite a number of times before on how wrong it is. People who are analyzing farm fires were saying that already this year, the number of farm fires are more than what they were in the last 2 years. So all of these are really alarming, and we talk about all of this only in the winter periods. But I think that fact really remains that the year-round pollution is a real concern for the north of India. None of that has changed. None of that has improved drastically or significantly. A couple of months back on your channel, on a similar show, we talked about how Delhi's air quality is plateauing. But the gains that were happening in very minimal respect have been far outweighed, again, by just a tipping point that comes with various kinds of climate conditions also today interacting with what is going on. This is an El Nino year for climate change, which means, a year like an El Nino comes with weak monsoons, but also weak winds. And you can see how weak winds and poor breezes causing difficult conditions for even air quality in Bombay, leave aside just the north of India. But combined with it, the fact that some real air quality management measures must be taken to curb all the activities, that is still wanting. There is lots that is being said on construction and demolition, but again, it feels that real tough action is missing over there.
Sure.
And also on smog guns, I was about to say there is research that actually shows that deploying the smog guns in the best of cases will give you 10 to 15% result for 1.5 to 2 hours, just between 100 and 200 feet. So that's the range you're looking at.
So smog guns are without a doubt a joke. I mean, they have been for a while. I mean, people see a smog gun and perhaps it's meant to give the illusion that the government is doing something. In fact, there's not much that governments can actually do. It needs much more at the level of not just a state government, but the center as well. Where's the political will? Before I go across to Bhavreen and Dr. G.C. Khilnani, Bhargav, back to you. What is causing the immediate pollution now in the national capital region?
I mean, the immediate issue of air pollution happening right now, Aarti already touched on that a little bit. Change in meteorology, as well as the fact that there are seasonal pollutants which are coming up into the air, is certainly a cause of that. But I think I would just step back a little bit from the fact that this is a seasonal problem, Vishnu, and focus on the fact that it is neither just a seasonal problem, nor is it just a Delhi problem. Just last week, you saw how bad the situation was in Mumbai. The fact that there's the increasing awareness of air pollution being a problem across the rest of the country, I think there is a risk also that we are seeing now a proliferation of the short-term techno-fix approach to air pollution that we're seeing in Delhi taking place across the rest of the country as well. We are seeing proposals for smog towers coming up in Mumbai as well as other parts of the country. Smog guns, as well as this very dust-focused approach to air pollution management, is now the status quo across every other city that has developed an action plan. And this idea that just by controlling dust measures or by dust control measures, you can solve this air pollution problem is really not based in any kind of science at all. I think there's a across the board strategy that really needs to be developed, and only governments can do that.
It's like sweeping sweeping dust under the carpet. It just sort of that's essentially what it is. Bhavreen, is there anything to suggest that farm fires across North India, which has been a stubble burning, a huge problem, has started, in significant measure this year as well?
So, Vishnu, everything here, I mean, all that we've spoken, the experts are speaking, so there's nothing for me to say on data, etc. But whether it's palm fire or whether we are talking of the vehicular emissions or construction dust, everything is about sound policy and then the strict implementation. Now, here also, I mean, we of course appreciate that the first time ever we are talking of crop diversification and things, but how is that going to be brought? How are we actually going to make that happen? we know the biodecomposers are not working. There's again studies being said, the experts are saying that, but we are in denial. It's exactly the smog tower kind of a thing. So much time went by. 2 years went by. We were talking of smog towers, seeing hope. Experts were saying from the beginning that it's not going to work. This is not the solution. But then we wasted all that time. And what is the damage? No, it's not only the 23 crores that we wasted on that, or we used our public resources, but it's our children's lungs. I mean, what are we doing? So that's exactly these. It's very like you said. These photo optic kind of solutions are very tempting for the government to show, but this is extremely a huge amount of damage that it's causing. The farmers have to be supported. There is no doubt about that. They're not being given support. There is enough evidence. There is they're saying it. We've kind of connecting them in many ways, to the government, to the committees, but nothing has happened. It's just been the same. In fact, I would even request you, Vishnu, why don't we bring farmers here on the shows to speak? Why should we? For them.
We get their voices, on their fields, but perhaps it's time to include farmers or their representatives on programs like this and try and get a real understanding of why the entire mechanism or system or proposal after proposal of getting rid of stubble has completely failed in Punjab and Haryana and other parts. Dr. Khilani, how bad is it so far this year? What are you seeing, and what is your advice to people watching this program?
So Vishnu, almost 2 weeks back, I had an OPD in the morning where there was 30-40% increase in the number of cases that I see. There was increased cough, wheezing, shortness of breath, person not able to sleep in the night. When I tested them, the lung functions were okay, the X-ray was okay, but what I found that one of the index of airway inflammation, what is called fraction of exhaled nitric oxide, was immensely raised, telling me that there is intense airway inflammation. The only reason I could find was increased airway inflammation. That time the AQI was poor, not bad. I also saw increased number of admissions in the ICU and the hospital with respiratory and heart symptoms. This is nothing new. Although you said the data has come now, but 25 or 30 years back we did a study where there was increased number of heart attacks, asthma attacks and COPD attacks. There was a study from Terry, which I was a part, where there was increased death by 0.11% with the rise of 10 micrograms of PM10. So data is nothing new. Only thing it has come into black and white by Chicago study saying that our life expectancy is lost. So it is important for us to understand that these days, especially the elderly, should stay at home, not go for morning walk. There's hardly any use of any usual mask. If you want to go out, use the N99. That is called KN99 mask. And unfortunately, air purifiers have very little value for any healthy person. If you think that you have bought a purifier and you are staying in the room, so you are breathing a good air, that's absolutely false. It's only useful for people who have chronic lung disease or who are dependent on oxygen, have got a serious heart problem. Summarizing it, that no amount of air pollution is safe. The WHO has given an air quality standard as 5 micrograms, PM2.5. Now the California goes into a fit if there is PM2.5 is 12.5 during the, their burning. And what we are doing, we are breathing at the PM2.5, 100 almost all the time. So what is the remedy you have been asking? I am a pulmonary medicine, but I have been following this subject for last 30-35 years. Engine quality, fuel quality, stopping electricity generation by coal. Unorganized construction should be stopped or altered. If we do this, we keep blaming every time poor farmers. This time when data came, only 3% pollution is because of stubble burning, but stubble burning is not there in Hyderabad, Jaipur, Bombay, Kanpur, where pollution is now. Lens has taken away from Delhi, and also we are seeing pollution all over.
Dr. Khilani, you're quite right, and I just wanted to go back to Bhargav Krishna. Bhargav, Bombay, Mumbai is an area right next to the sea, and there was always a sense that air pollution would be relatively low or lower than other cities, and that was the case. But this year we have seen fairly high air pollution. What's the cause?
Again, I think relying on weather conditions or air exchange just to be the sole savior from bad air pollution is not a good strategy for anybody to rely on. I think the fact that weather conditions are constantly shifting, you have climate change contributing to extraordinary weather situations in different parts of the country as well as the world, making that the only point that you base your strategy on, assuming that stuff will get blown away over the city into the sea, is not a good idea. I mean, there are tremendous localized sources of air pollution in Mumbai that have never been addressed. You have all sorts of fires that occur in the Deona garbage dump. You have so much transport-related air pollution. Now, the fact that the only real sector that has been spoken about since the episode in Mumbai over the last several days has been focusing on construction-related activity, it really speaks to a sort of very narrow view of what contributes to air pollution, right? I mean, there's so many different sources. You have industries in and around Mumbai as well that contribute to a lot of these sort of increase in air pollution. But I think there's also a sort of larger conversation around this, right? Which is that even though you've had over the last 4 or 5 years policies that have been introduced to try and address this multi-sectoral problem, not just a dust or construction-based problem, but a multi-sectoral problem of air pollution through the National Clean Air Program, through the introduction of institutions like the Commission on Air Quality Management, the focus still seems to be on a very narrow range of sources, right? I think there needs to be a substantial expansion, partly because we've limited ourselves to focusing on PM10 as a metric of progress, which is largely dust, whereas PM2.5 is the real particle of harm, as well as smaller particles than that cause even more harmful effects. But the architecture or institutions that need to be built around such policies really has not happened. I mean, some of the work that we published last year, for instance, shows that across the 10 state pollution control boards, the primary institutions tasked with regulating air quality across the Indo-Gangetic Plain, there are between 60 and 70% vacancies in all of the technical positions. These are the environmental engineers and scientists who are tasked with regulating air quality, maintaining emission standards at industries, all of these different valuable core activities, right? And in the absence of that, how do you expect to see improvements? This is the kind of institution building that really needs to happen to support the longer term. And let's face it, it's going to be a long-term challenge that we need to address. We're not going to solve this overnight.
No, but you see, Bhargav, the problem is it was a long-term challenge even 10 years ago. But,
exactly.
If you played out this program 10 years ago, other than the fact that we'd all be a fair bit younger, the content of the show would be identical. No different.
That is the
no solutions.
Yeah.
People keep dying. The only difference really is that we now actually have that data to show that we are, this is killing us. Aarti, what really has changed in the last few years to improve things, or has nothing changed essentially?
Very less has changed on ground, Vishnu. What has changed is that you have far more voices talking about it. If anything, what has changed is the scientific data is quite established. 5 years back, there was less acceptance of the health evidence. It is understood by all policymakers today. Whether you are able to accept it or not is a secondary issue, but you do recognize and you're cognizant as a political decision maker of the huge impact that air quality is having on people's health. Those who are living in Delhi and in the north of India have friends and families themselves and they themselves. So the impact is not like climate change was 10, 15 years ago. The impact is in the household. The impact is upon us. So in that sense, a lot has changed in terms of awareness, but I suppose behavior and attitudes is next level, and that is taking a lot of time. That's also taking a lot of time to implement some real measures that people can adopt and implement. When odd even happened, the results out of odd even were never encouraging, and they never will be. And similarly, if things happen that in GRAP you have to reduce diesel vehicle use, I'm sorry, to the extent that it impacts, people moving around in the city, it's very hard for, sorry, you have to give me a second.
No, you take it. Aarti, I just hope that this cough is not caused by the air around you. I should correct myself. I hope you don't have to cough at all, whatever the reason is.
It could be. It could be.
But let me just go across to you, Bhavreen. You know, if you look at the spread of air pollution data across India, again, this is something we didn't know very much about. We're talking about Mumbai on this program. But in fact, if you look at air pollution, the entire Indo-Gangetic plain has seen a terrible impact of air pollution. Smaller cities have seen perhaps even worse than Delhi. So it's a pan-India problem. It's not just related to areas where we live.
Yes, Vishnu, that is something I think in the recent years that everyone's been talking about. That it's not Delhi centric, and that is why I think Bhargav, I know in many other programs here on NDTV, he's also said and written that there's an airshed approach that must be adopted. And so have I heard the Delhi government spokespersons even admitting to that. They look to work on this as a whole and not only as Delhi, intrinsically only Delhi. But that's exactly what it is. If anybody who's not supporting, anybody who is not working towards clean air, even supporting another city or themselves, is actually, should be prosecuted for killing, our children and their future. We just heard, you just said that my children and your children are going to live 10 years less shorter than anybody else. Is that acceptable? It's just getting to a point now, and like you said, for a decade now, we've been just going on saying the same things, and we know, and now it's so evident that it's not Delhi, it's the whole country. Practically everywhere, even cities like Pune. Yeah. Only after Warrior Moms came in that I realized that there was so much pollution in Pune. It's even we were learning and we were going through. So it's not about Delhi, and everyone will have to come together. And like I always say, has to be
but we've been hoping for this. And Dr. Khilani, my final question to you. We've seen countries, however, achieve a great deal of success. For example, China, in a city like Beijing, which was the most polluted in the world, has brought down air pollution levels tremendously through incredibly difficult legal provisions, legislation, and a real determination to fix the problem. They fixed it to a large extent. Is that the bottom line over here? That we can essentially talk, but in our democracy, we don't have the tools or the political will, in a sense, to actually push through extremely hard measures. For example, which government in India would conceivably stop the sale of vehicles which are non-electric? And yet that seems to be one of the moves that has to be done. Can it be done realistically? Perhaps not. But that's just one solution, right? Would you say that we can't really achieve much in our system?
Vishnu, you have actually hit the nail. Because in California, about 100 years back, they had the similar air pollution as we have in India. Now, over the 100 years, their number of vehicles have gone up 10 times. Their pollution has gone down more than 10 times. This is because of good engine quality and good fuel quality and implementation. Although we say we have got Bharat 5, Bharat 6 fuel, but how many vehicles in Delhi or for any city for the matter in India have actually good quality engines and good quality fuel is being used? Is there an adulteration of fuel? That is the one thing. You talk about good construction, but if you go to the actual construction side, what are the measures being taken for that? So it's not that we don't have the knowledge. We have the policy, we know the knowledge. Implementation is the single word. In China, they were able to implement because they have different political and administrative system, and they have been able to increase their life expectancy by 2.3 years over a period of 8 years. Mm-hmm. Whereas, despite good fuel quality, supposedly good fuel quality, and another thing is that if you make electrical vehicles, that's fine, but where the electricity comes from? It comes it comes from the coal.
It's part of a larger problem, and it's a vicious sort of nexus.
You have to look at the solar energy.
You're quite right. You're quite right. I mean, just batteries alone and their construction is a larger concern. But we'll leave that for another day. I'm out of time on this program. I suspect we'll be back talking about this throughout this winter. At the moment, it doesn't look good at all. Need to take a short break. More coming up.